Good evening, everyone. We're almost ready to get underway. This session is entitled Bringing It All Together. I've played your host, but now I'm going to switch hats and become a moderator and hopefully direct our conversation here. Um, just so we can mind our manners and be polite, let me make sure I introduced myself. My name is Mark Clark, and I'm the technical assistance manager for the division of TA within TARC at NCUIH. Um, I finished graduate studies at Howard University and earned a doctorate in education a few years thereafter in 2004. I did postdoctoral studies back at Howard again in special education leadership. Um, in 2018, I earned a certified project management professional credential, recently renewed, and I stay engaged in public health promotion. I've been involved in public health and health education projects since 1983. I joined the CUI staff in 2018, so I'm so pleased to be part of what we have going on here. Next slide, please. This session is called Bringing It All Together, and it's intended to be a wrap up. And so it's appropriate to say that we're almost out of time, but in so many ways that describes not only this particular session and the moment we're in this evening, but in some respects how we're beginning to feel with regard to the epidemic, the pandemic, and the sense of urgency. Um, so I think it's a good time for us to keep in mind the purpose it brings us here. And still going to share just a few things as we wrap up. I think as sort of a start to our conversation, it's good to have a quickie recap of one of the essential items that Zep shared with us in her session, and it had to do with data and data quality. One of her key questions, as a matter of fact, was asking about the kind of data you get as a board member. And I noticed that board members weren't responsive per se to that question in particular, but there's another way of framing that question about the kinds and the quality of data we get as board members, or really as individuals. And in some respects, that data question about the kinds and the quality of data where we have access to is sort of a linchpin for every one of our sessions that have been part of this 6-week training series. If you think about where we began our session, and this by way of recap, with history of UIOs, certainly the one of the thematic portions of that history is the disproportionate burden of disease among American Indian and Alaska Natives. That's been there almost from the moment of this settler colonial history that we're still living through. This notion of this burden of disease then is driven by the data we have, the data we don't have, our understanding of it, the stories we tell about this disproportionate burden. Again, with history, the data about that burden is vital for our understanding of where we are and the mission that's in front of us. With the roles and responsibilities of board members, a key concern is with the adequacy of funding, again driven by information about budgetary needs, about costs, about the current cost not only of supplies but even the scarcity of supplies. We went through the moments with the missing PPE and what that meant for our capacity to deliver services. Finally, with the board selection, session 3 of our training session, looking at how we recruit board members, choosing the right candidate is really intensely data driven. When you think about it, involves interviews, it involves biographical data, sometimes fiduciary data about the responsibility that members have had in the past and their capacity to not only maybe raise funds, but their experience with accounting and other kinds responsibilities. So this notion of choosing the right data is intensely and data driven in the sense of we need to find out about people. We need to ask the right questions. And that too, it really is a data oriented process. So this notion of the kinds and quality of data is something that is really a foundational idea that drives the not only board responsibilities but this training. Finally, this notion of high performing boards and how do you know when you're on a high performing board um, has to do with data available to you and informational transparency is a really fancy way of saying uh, how do we know that the data that we have is accurate and what data do we have available to us? How do we know how it was collected? That has to do with the transparency question. So it's a fancy term for describing the for our need to be open about what we collect and how we collect it. So here again, data is really key as a way of linking together all of our sessions that we've had this evening. So as a recap, let's keep that question that Zep ended up on our mind about the kinds and quality of data available to you as a board member and what we do with it. Next slide, please. The notion of data can't be uh, um, underestimated. The Urban Institute of Urban Indian Health Institute, UIHI, which has the technical responsibility for collecting data on urban Indian health projects for the IHS, released a report that they use the term data genocide to describe the missing data, the poor data collection, and the current moment we're in with data. In fact, a recent Centers for Disease Control study found that when it comes to race and ethnicity data around vaccination, almost half of the data collected is missing or inaccurate about the race and ethnicity of those who've been vaccinated. The data is either is missing for some 48% of all those persons who have been vaccinated. So we genuinely don't know how well or how poorly we're doing when it comes to vaccination among American Indian and Alaska Natives because states are not collecting the data well. And this is true across the board with people of color in terms of the poor job that's being done with collecting race and ethnicity data. This failure to collect this data is sometimes referred to as an act of erasure when it comes to particularly American Indians and Alaska Natives, because states have traditionally and historically done such a poor job with collecting data that's meaningful to American Indian and Alaska Native people. So failing to count is failing to plan. And failing to plan means continuing to underfund and have under-resourced programs. So data genocide might be an accurate description of where we stand when it comes to information that's really vital to us. Next slide, please. So part of this wrap-up process is meant to get you our participants talking, so I don't end up doing all the talking. This doesn't become a monologue. One way in which we're going to ask you to be part of this process is we're going to encourage you to write a headline for us. Um, the 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 headline will be based on the topics we've covered, the topic we covered tonight. The one thing we'll ask you to put in the chat box, and we'll actually ask you to take a couple minutes for that. But following that, we'll do a wrap up of some tip sheets and takeaways that we have from each of our evenings, and we'll talk about yeah, the last items that may have stood out or memorable topics that we've covered in our 6-week sojourn. So I'm going to ask you to take 2 minutes, and each of you, I'll expect to give me some feedback about the one headline you'd write. Again, it doesn't have to be a complete sentence. It doesn't have to be grounded in data or any kind of. It's completely up to your imagination. But I ask you to jot into the chat box a headline that would describe the one thing that you feel like you really need to tell your fellow board members about this training session when you return back to regular duty tomorrow for some of you. And that's the headline. So the clock is ticking right now, 23 after the hour. You have 2 minutes to enter your headline into our chat box. And it's not a contest, although we're going to look at the headlines. I don't want you to feel like there's a competition going on here. And we're rounding the bend. We're right at 7:25. Those of you who haven't had a chance to enter anything into the chat box, feel free to continue working. I want to just review what has been submitted. And I really am impressed by the phrasing. This is a catchy one. Engagement is key to board performance. That's a great headline to share with your colleagues when you are at your next board meeting. A solid overview of how boards can support their health center, I believe, was offered by Crystal Blue. That's a great one. I love that phrasing. Get your updates here. That's excellent. And I see an exclamation point behind it. That's very well done. I enjoy that one. Thank you so much, Donis. Here's one. How do we ensure our numbers are accurate in representation of Native Americans? That's a powerful headline. We could write that every day of the week. Thank you, Mary. Here's our headline from our own Evie Maho. UIOs have dedicated boards of directors. That's a nice takeaway message from those of us who are training the board. How important is cultural competence and awareness for the people you serve? That's a great headline. What can we do to correct the data received regarding misrepresentation of Native Americans? Excellent, excellent headline. That could be the start of a peer-reviewed journal or two. There's a lot that needs to be done there. This headline, UIO governance strategies for quality Native healthcare. That's a wonderful capsule way to describe what we're all after in our moments here together. This kind of training exercise doesn't happen unless there are learners. You know, one thing I recall from my education PhD days ago is if there's teaching going on, but there ain't no learning going on, then there's something really wrong in that school, in that classroom. So this part of what happens and makes a training really a key moment for us is the engagement and the sharing with one another. So I really appreciate your feedback with your headlines. And these are some really well done headlines. And thank you for your cooperation. I like this one. How are we doing with our QI measurements? that's a great headline, and one that would get some conversations started with your fellow board members, I'm sure. Why don't we look at our next slide? Again, we've promised to wrap up. I wanted to share with you an extra item. I'm not going to call it an accessory because I think it might be a vital piece of what you'll walk away with. We've created and we'll publish what we've described as tips and takeaways. They're summary sheets, one-pager sheets that describe the training sessions that you've been through. So each session will have a tip away sheet. I believe pictured is a pictorial representation of what that tip sheet will look like for the first session entitled a brief history of UIOs. Some of the tips and takeaways, again, whether they're in the form of bullet points or broad narrative statements and citations from the literature. The key thing is to try and offer a quick summary, something you could download and print out and share amongst your fellow board members as a way to describe some of the content of our training. And of course, the archived on our website will always be not only the full recordings, but PDFs of the slide sets that those tips are drawn from. So of course, the challenge of creating the tips and the takeaways is literally to create a handful of bullets from a presentation that might have had 30 or 40 slides in it is a feat, to say the least. And part of what I think is interesting about that, if you were to look at it based on what your board faces or the context that your UIO operates in, what might be of value to you in that particular training could be something that we didn't even have on the tip sheet. So using the tip sheet as sort of like the tip of the iceberg, while you understand there's a lot more there, and you're welcome to dig into the archives and see more of those sessions. But I think if you'll share it amongst your fellow board members, you'll have an opportunity to be talking in a very informed way about some, not only our content, but maybe some of the ideas that are worth exploring further. So I'm looking forward to sharing the tips and takeaways with you. Of course, you're on our listserv. You're going to be the first folks in line to get these when they're released. They're still going to be in a review process to make sure that they're not only attractive, but they are the best representation, not only of our training content, but of NCUIH itself. So we'll put a polish on it and send it out to you as quickly as we can. But those are, again, a new accessory for our training series, tips and takeaways. Next slide, please. Now, we did a little bit of audience participation. I'm so glad we had a chance to get you fired up with the chat box. Now we're going to call this part of our wrap up a twist and shout. And all that really means is that we're going to ask you literally, and I'm going to recommend that we unmute the mics. So I give you fair warning, but this shout out is about asking you to talk about important points that have been made. Whether you wrote that in your headline or not, this shout out is your opportunity to just be verbal, to let us know what you think. And so what we're going to ask you to shout out for the next few minutes, and we're right at 7:31, so we have some time. I hope to get you engaged here verbally again. Is what do you consider the most important points made, whether it was tonight or on other nights? And secondly, you could shout out about what is a surprising insight that kind of caught you off guard, that might make you say, hey, I didn't know that, or that really makes me curious about the meaning or the implications of what I just learned. So tell me something that might not fit in with something you already know, or conversely, something that fits in perfectly with something you already knew. So the mics are unmuted, and don't be afraid to use your indoor voices to speak out about a surprising point, an important point, or a point that really caught you off guard.
This is Mary Tarango, chairwoman of the Sacramento Native American Health Center in Sacramento.
Hi,
and
Mary.
Well, hi, Marc. Thank you. Thank you for overseeing this. Thank you for bringing this to us. One thing that just kind of made me stop and think was the discussion about the board's role in the different functions, that we know that we take in part. Yes. And the bigger responsibility, the bigger vision of things, our legal, responsibilities, and especially as a chair, the things that, are part of what, I have oversight for, our compliance and ensuring that those things are taking place too. The auditor, our audits and things, and we take great pride in our audits that we have had. So it's a good thing. Our human resources, really, we've got a staffing right now. I think it's over 150. Correct me, Crystal or Nick or whoever else is on board right now that's part of the board. But I mean, it's a substantial, it might even be 200 at this time. I think it is. Wow. Now that I'm thinking about it. But we've also, in ensuring that the compliance, with all of our laws, that, that not only, hold on a minute. Take it in there. I'm babysitting grandchildren right now, so I've got them in here. But anyway, the compliance with our employees and things like that, the different policies and procedures that we have, as far as discrimination, I mean, all of those things, federal, state, and county, our quality improvement and our health center and how we jump, or how staff jumps to things that may not be just so. I am so proud of what our center does and how we interact with the community and all the great responses that we get. And I'll just real short here. We've had the COVID vaccinations, that we've taken part in, and, for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And from community perspective, now these are people that don't work in our center or even really have an active interaction, but to hear the the kudos, to hear of our professionalism, the staff's professionalism, what they do and how they do, it's just amazing. I sit out in the parking lot sometimes and just interact with people just to see how well we're doing. And it's just, not that I'm too amazed, but I just get excited when I hear some of the people that say, what can we do, to make snacky, what can we do? What can we give? What can, I said, your interaction here, your community support is what's important. So it just reminded me of all those things, and it just kind of opens it up. So I thank you for that reminder. And that's something that I will take to my next board meeting at the end of the month. We meet every month, and we have a wonderful board report that sometimes is almost 200 pages long with all of our directors and our departments, that provide their updates and how they're meeting strategic goals and things, and our CEO. And it's just an amazing place. And I can't say much more to that. I mean, we are AAAC, accredited. So, I mean, we're pretty excited about the things that we do and how we serve our community. So thank you for that. Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you. I really appreciate your comments. All the rest of you are unmuted, so we welcome any of your comments.
Good evening. This is Donis Drapo. I'm Ihantawan. Good evening. I'm Ihantawan, Dakota. Hi, from South Dakota. I'm a new board member for South Dakota Urban Indian Health. And so this is good information for me. I've been to, of course, our meetings are virtual due to the pandemic and stuff. So I've been on 2 so far. Like I said, I'm fairly new, but what I liked is about, the wellness. You always have to be, as a board member or any organization, no matter if you're staff or, those ways to help you be centered and come back, to your, what's going to help you continue the good work that you do. So I like in the second session when they talked about creating a board member self-assessment that you do periodically. I think that's a really good idea. And then you can kind of gauge yourself and see, if I am that person that kind of sits back and doesn't really interact, or if I'm, going over people, I don't like to be in either of those roles. I like to be more in the middle, but I thought that's a good idea. I like that. And the idea of the retreats, like I said, to keep your wits about you, if you will. So, yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. I appreciate that. I know Evie offered a lot of insight that we actually added into one of our tip sheets about retreats and how to organize retreats. So thank you for that. I know that was a topic of interest, and thank you for sharing, Donis. As a matter of fact, regarding board assessment and measurements, we'll have one more item to share with you about what we call a performance matrix that we'll just briefly share with you. Other comments, please?
I just want to comment really quick, Mark, that Jonas, I really appreciate that. That is truly a component. I think that when we do a self-assessment on how we perform as a member of a board of directors, it really a self-reflection, a true self-reflection and assessment. And then as a board, also together as a team, how are we performing is also another essential part of that. So I'm very happy to hear that. The way we communicate, the way we engage, the way we work, and understanding what our strengths are individually and what areas we might bring to the table, our expertise, our experience, our education, our tribal communities' perspectives, the local communities' perspective. At the end of the day, we are reminded that we are spokespeople, spokespersons for people who cannot speak or who are shy, who cannot convey how it's important that in their communities, we want quality healthcare systems. So I encourage you to do that. And Jonas, thank you for taking that back to your board and making that a part of maybe a consistent activity written within your bylaws so that it becomes an expectation. And when we do that, when we repeatedly do these things, they become habits. These habits then become a part of our everyday business. It becomes a part of our culture, the way we behave, act, work in every aspect of a board of directors. So that's just kind of my comment around that, and I encourage that.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful way of describing the growth, the evolution from new board member or novice board member to a seasoned professional. I think it's really I like the way in which Adonis just described the idea of how you can represent and not only have self-improvement but support others' improvement, so that we don't only become a pillar for our family's health and well-being, but neighbors and communities by the way we live and the information we have to share. I think those are really valuable things that board members bring as representatives of a vibrant community. More comments? We've still
I'd
got
like
the mic open.
Say a comment here. I really like the last remark about, again, my name's Rod Ward. I'm with the new board member over in South Dakota as well. And I know that within the community of Sioux Falls, there is a lot of grassroots people, with the surrounding areas of many different tribes that come into Sioux Falls. And there was a comment said about how some people that are shy and really don't have that, I guess, ability or even that know how to engage with some of these services that we have within the urban centers. And so for our area, there is a really good change in our direction in terms of the culture and making it more obtainable for a lot of our grassroots members. And so we're really excited for the direction that we're looking at to make sure that, people are just there for their care. And so I'm looking forward to those measuring sticks that we get to have to show that progress. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Rod. I appreciate that observation. There's something about creating a welcoming environment, an atmosphere that is engaging for people who may be somewhat quiet or shy or reserved, but part of what you can do to create that welcoming atmosphere is trying to reach them at the level in which they're used to engaging. And I think that's when we're at our best, when we're offering services that meet the needs of our families, is in that arena when we operate with the cultural lens that meets everyone's needs.
I think in addition to that, one of the other things I've seen in some of the board of directorship across the country and is that in their mission, their vision statements, it really incorporates either at the tribal, if it's like many tribes, at least a common value or a common belief, and it's embedded in that fundamental part and piece of their bylaws within that board of director. It's a constant reminder of what is going to drive their work. And so it's something to do too if you want to be inclusive and to bring in some of those cultural components. I think there was a question about that, and it was much more of a headliner, but it sounded like in that headliner question that diversity, the cultural aspects of that is also important to you as well. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to light, but some organizations have done that, and they continue to infuse, the common modern today's approaches with some of the traditional cultural aspects, value system, belief systems around health, life, well-being, longevity, and what do we want our people to look like, feel like, think like, talk like, and live. So just some things I wanted to share, and it's just happening across the country in many healthcare systems. If you ever want to research, and I'm sure you've already heard a lot about what Alaska Consortium does, they have a whole, their culture and the way they run their healthcare system is really based on their traditional local philosophies, and that's what it's built on. And so something to look into as well, and encourage you all to do.
It would be such a rich conversation as we, not only build bridges but learn about all the ways in which we have our own walk. But it's a healthy walk. It's a walk that is been well traveled and traveled by many. I think it's nice to be able to share that. I am looking at our time. I want to make sure we have time to discuss what our closeout information, but I really am not wanting to shut off the conversation. If there are others who have something they want to shout out, now is the time. We've still got those mics open. Feel free to share whatever observation you'd like to share.
It's so fun hearing kids laughing in the background.
It is.
I hear that always on the weekends with my nephew, so.
I'm sorry, like... I know that's my grandkids in the background. They are like, oh my goodness. I'm sorry about that.
It makes you feel like family.
It is good. So like why we do what we do, it's for our next generation,
It's exactly that. Exactly that. I wanted to speak to, I think it was Rod that said something earlier about, how the transition and how do your health center. I think, for us, I mean, we, our board is, I think it's about 80%, I think, Native and profession as well. But, on our commitment in the quality of life. And we really stress, providing a culturally competent, holistic, and patient-centered, continuum of care. And in that, it's not only just the words, but it's our staffing, which is, it's diverse. We have everyone there. I mean, because we're in the midtown of Sacramento, but a lot of our, your footprints, a lot of the things that we have, the names of our rooms are traditional cultured, tribes in the area, our pictures, our murals and things, so people look at that, non-Indians look at that and they say, what is that? But it's embracing to bring people in, and our people that are there that have a knowledge of what that is, they embrace that as well. And they're able to provide that and give it to community. So, I mean, it's a good relationship. I want to just stress it, and don't be afraid to show and demonstrate who you are as a people, because, for us, it's, it's our health center, our Urban Indian Health Center, but we have no tribal or ethnic requirements. We receive everyone, everybody's welcome. So, I think I just wanted to stress that to Rodney, I think it was, to, as you're embarking on this, to remember to be you, be who you are as a people,
That's a really valuable insight, and I know when we mobilize our signs and symbols and signifiers and things that have a rich meaning for us, that's part of what's going on with that mission to be who we are for the people we need to be ourselves in front of and on behalf of.
I think another really great way to look at it too is I used to do QI consultancy for Parker Indian Health Center, and in one of their sister satellite sites, they actually had their creation story painted on top of the ceiling as you walked in their rotunda, and it was just awesome. And they would often say, the Joint Commission would walk in and be like, what is that? So it's such a great point to also incorporate is the artwork in your health centers is impactful. The setup in your health centers is impactful. Workflow is also impactful. So also infusing that into your workflows. I'd love to do a session on that. It'd be so amazing. But I love this conversation about having those cultural dynamics into your everyday workplace, because that is who you are. That is who your community is. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, it definitely matters. And when you create a space that's yours, it should represent you. It should
Yes.
reflect you. And that's what declares that space as yours.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everyone for their comments. We I just wanted to make sure that we don't forget to get your reflections when it's time to do our evaluation, which we will do shortly. Just wanted to share a couple more items with you. And I suppose for a moment we're done twisting and shouting, but you know, we can open back the mics whenever you're ready. Just with a show of your hands, just let us know you've got one more thing to say, and we'll be glad to hear from you. Next slide, please. Here again, just wanted to give you an idea of those the tips and takeaway sheets. This particular quote is in our takeaway sheet on the brief history of urban Indian organizations, and I really am drawn to this particular phrase. That's a quote from that report. The responsibility for the provision of health care arising from treaties and laws that recognize this responsibility as an exchange for the cession of millions of acres of Indian land does not end at the borders of an Indian reservation. The federal responsibility for the provision of healthcare services follows them there. We're talking about uh, wherever American Indian and Alaska Natives reside. That responsibility follows you from home, city, or rural locations, and that statement says so much about the history and the origins of our UIOs. And actually, I wrote that there in case someone didn't come up with the headline. I had headlines that I was gonna kind of use as my backup. So I'm glad everybody had headlines. Let's go to the next slide. Again, from the tip sheets on roles and responsibilities, the some of the many challenges that boards face and common pitfalls to avoid. You can reflect on those in the takeaways and tip sheets, and that was covered in the presentation itself. So why don't we move on beyond that particular uh, summary, and one more slide, please. About selection and recruitment, remembering, I think a vital takeaway message from selection and recruitment was the notion that selection and recruiting is a process, so that we need to greet new members with not only open arms, but an orientation process that is well suited to get them acclimated to their responsibilities and their roles as a board member. At the same time, for board members who happen to exit, we need a strategy to capture their wisdom, to perhaps do an exit interview that captures their experience, and maybe helps us reflect on what it's like to have that walk as a board member, from the beginning of the walk to the end of the walk, from orientation to exit. So I think those are vital items that reflect that notion of a process of board membership. Next slide, please. I had mentioned that there was a discussion of high performing boards. I wanted to share this one item with you. It's described as the board performance matrix. What's really nice about it is it describes a way of assessing your performance as a board, and it's a sort of self-assessment. But what it describes is a couple of ways in which you could measure your board performance. That's about the way in which you would assess that then has to do with participation and levels of participation that are described as threshold participation, which is attending, for example, if we were looking at a measure of board attendance at meetings, attending 70% of the meetings might be a threshold that might be barely acceptable as a board member. But if you were to look at full participation as a measurement and using that criterion, attending 85% of the meetings would be even better. And then finally, exceptional participation with regard to that measurement of attending meetings is full participation at each and every meeting, and perhaps even becoming a chairperson of a committee that obviously might mean even more meeting engagement as a board member. So that way of thinking of this matrix of measurement, of looking at the kinds of qualities or ways in which you could assess performance is just a nice way of visualizing what could be a standard for measuring your own performance as a board member. So this performance matrix is just a handy tool to consider, and it's certain there's all sorts of tools you could use, and we'll of course have resources that are not only in our board book but on our takeaway tips that will introduce you to more tools. One more slide, please. Now, this is the moment where we can breathe a sigh of relief and express our appreciation. I'd like to express our appreciation to all of our trainers, our subject matter experts, and friends and colleagues from NCUIH. You have my heartfelt thanks for making this training an opportunity to share with one another. And so I'm expressing my appreciation as the host of this final session. The other expression of appreciation I'd love from you is twofold. I really appreciate your sharing your headlines and your takeaways. I'd like to take this last 5 minutes to ask you to make sure that you take just a few moments of our 8 o'clock. If you take these last 5 minutes and complete our survey, I would ask you to go immediately to our online survey. It literally takes you about 4 or 5 minutes. So if you were to bid farewell now, go straight to the survey and complete that document, that would be your full commitment of carrying us through the 8 o'clock hour. Again, I'd like you to follow the links that are in the chat box to the survey, to the online survey, and tell us what you thought about the training. I genuinely want to hear your reflections about what we did well, what we could do better, and any thoughts you have about future training topics, other kinds of ways in which we could continue to serve the board members, the leadership of our UIOs. We learn from one another and describe our training efforts as a peer-to-peer sharing. So with that said, again, I've expressed my appreciation, and you certainly have expressed plenty of appreciation to us through the chat box. I'd ask you to take these last few moments and go straight to our survey, our online survey, and give us your feedback. I promise you it won't take more than 4 or 5 minutes of your time. I'm going to, I guess, also call out Zep Fuller, the director of TA, who might want to bid a fond farewell to all of our gathered participants on behalf of my division.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you everybody so much for attending. I did put some upcoming events in here. Our CDC IPC has been diligently working on some good sessions for you. So the next session is the COVID-19 infection control, good ventilation and air handling as a part of infection control. Link is in the chat box to register for that. We also have our annual conference coming up here. We got some great sessions lined up, including one for mental health for frontline staff. CDC will also be presenting in that conference. We also have our youth counselor bringing you some amazing stuff. We've got some updates from IHS, just a lot of really good items happening within our conference. So please register. And then the last item in there is our virtual 3K, 5K walk, run. So you guys know we have it in our blood to be active, just if you're able to share that on your social media networks, please do. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn for a quick reshare onto your social media platforms. So thank you. We are so blessed to have you guys here with us today. And we just want to thank you for all that you do. We hope you guys have a great evening. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much. And one final appreciation, I can't forget Noelle Zulke, our behind the scenes, making it all work, our IT wizard. Thank you so much, Noel. We appreciate you. It wouldn't happen without Noel, believe us. So again, we encourage you to take that survey, and it's been a great 6-week journey with you. Everyone, take care, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next gathering.
Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.